we have different skin. And my
Mm-hmm.
coworker said, she was like, yeah. And then she said, well, we could still be best friends.
The voice you just heard was one of my students from this past semester. Did she just say students? I sure did. This past year, I started teaching at Temple University, so I'll always be MG, the venue specialist. I'm really enjoying my role as Professor MG. As a project for my leadership and organizations class, the students paired up to record a short podcast about what they've enjoyed and learned in class so far, incorporating the role of emotional intelligence in their lives. With the students' permission to use their project for this season, I've broken each recording into bite sized clips. This week, I'm joined by my friend and now colleague, Dr. Ben Torsney. We'll listen to the clips and carry on the conversation started by Onasis and Josh. If you're looking to gain insight into motivational teaching styles and creating psychologically safe classrooms, you are in the right place. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the following episode, Coaching in the Classroom 307. Don't be late to class. Class is back in session. My guest today is my friend, Dr. Ben Torsney, who you might recognize from season 2 of Beyond the Venue podcast. How's it going today, Ben?
Hey, Mary Grace, how you doing? Nice to see you.
Super excited to have you here today. Before I just start gushing away as to how excited I am to be in the position I am now as Professor MG, I'll let you tell the audience a little bit about yourself first, if they did not yet get to know all about you from season 2.
Yeah, sure. I'm Ben Torsney. I'm a professor at Temple University. Known Mary Grace for, how long at this point?
12
years? 12 years, something like
12.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Father, partner, former Division III basketball star. I think that's a good way. It's a good way to.
Favorite.
I wore jersey number 41, just like Josh Onasis. So
I can't wait. It's coming up
It's
March.
great.
Marty, plans are already in the works for my Josh Onasis birthday party.
Hopefully he does a cameo. Does he do cameo?
Bob has already looked into this, and Dirk Nowitzki is not on Cameo. So if you're able to use your basketball connections, we can talk more offline on this. But for listeners that are like, what are they talking about? My husband, years ago started associating your whatever your age. He connects it to a jersey number from a sports player from any and all sports. So Ben just turned Brian Westbrook recently, and being originally from Dallas, Texas, as well as having spent a lot of my life studying the German language and living in Germany, I'm clearly a huge Dirk Nowitzki fan. So for years and years, I had said I don't really care about my 40th birthday, but 41 is going to be epic. So that's going to be coming up in 2023, and I'm very excited. So getting back to season 2 of the podcast, it's crazy to think that we were recording our episode for season 2 literally this time last year, because you were gearing up to go back to Temple for fall semester. And then you and I met for lunch late October, early November, and you're like, we need adjuncts. So
yeah, right.
So you're the reason that I ended up at Temple as an adjunct professor teaching and leadership in organizations and team processes. And this podcast project that I had the students do, I believe was actually a suggestion of yours. You having seen, what I had done with Beyond the Venue, that when I needed a project for the students to do while I was going to be out of town that week to go to New Orleans, you're like, why not have them record a podcast? So we are now coming full circle. And I believe you had both Josh and Onasis in your interpersonal communications class.
I did.
Yes. So yes. That was the biggest reason that I wanted to pair all of us together today. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and jump into our first clip.
Let's do it.
I'm Onasis Nilly.
I'm Josh Eisman. Yeah, our mission statement is for to get a better understanding of leadership within organizations and talk about different types of styles. And that gets us into our first question that I had for you, Onassis. And it's over the course of time, you've had a lot of experience playing within different football teams, different coaches, different ages, different skill levels. And I wanted to hear your thoughts on different leadership styles and what works the best for you and maybe has worked in the past.
I've been to a lot of different leadership styles and throughout my playing career. Since I've been playing football, basketball, ran a little track as well, and there's a lot of different leadership styles. I start from high school. High school, I had a coach. I had a coach named Todd Studer. He was very relaxed, and he really didn't get up on us for a lot. He really didn't like get on our case a lot, unless like things did not go his way. But most of the time, a lot of things went his way. And we really didn't have any like altercations throughout it, and with like any of our teammates as well. Like no altercations a lot throughout it, and the team really enjoyed him, and he was around the players, and he built a fantastic relationship around with our players. And coming to college, it was a different setting, different. I met the coach 1 2 times, but it's different from meeting the coach inside of recruiting to meeting him when you're on a playing field and you're actually in there going through the motion with him and getting coached up by him. It's two different things. But mention back on my high school coach. One time he didn't have to recruit me out to play football because of the fact that like I wanted to play it. So it's high school ball, so like you can, you know what I'm saying, like you don't really recruit type of thing, so it's different. So we always had like a genuine great connection. I can talk to him whenever. I can call him up right now and speak to him whenever. He's a great dude. But watching relate to college, like I said, is different from recruiting and being coached up. My coach in college, my first coach, it was a lot different because of the fact that like he really wasn't like hands on with the players. He was really like a lay. He really was like a distance. He seen from a distance, but if he seen something didn't go his way or like whatever, he would get on your case about it really hard, and he just ran things a lot differently. And his leadership style wasn't really like fitting for our organization and also our players. People lost his trust, and people lost the way that he was a leader. People didn't really look at him as a leader as that. But after being 2 years in college and seeing his type of leadership style, we got a new coach just come in, which he was very fitting to leadership style that the players were looking for, and he contrasted with the players a lot better than the previous coaches. He reminded me highly of my high school coach because I speak so highly of him. He reminds me of him because of the fact that like he's hands on with the players. You can go to his office anytime you want to go to his office and speak to him. Josh, I got a question for you. What leaders? What type of leaders what type of leaders have you had throughout your life, off the field or even on the field that you want to express about?
Oh well, yeah. First, I just wanted to say had some awesome points there. It sounds like your leaders that you've had in the past with more emotional intelligence, the more hands-on approach have affected you and your teammates in a much more positive way than the other side of that. And for me, so I used to work at Olney High School, and my boss there was a great leader. She oversaw the child care department. She oversaw community outreach, which had to do with giving out resources and helping out the community there. There's a lot of people that need help in that area. We had a very good bond. Everyone liked working with one another. If there were ever and there were altercations that we'd have with like people would disagree on like how to work with the kids, what to teach them, just getting tired maybe of like being in the same room with the same person
Right.
for every day of the week. And those problems would all get squashed as a team. She'd do a really good job of sitting us down and explaining to each of us what both of our sides were, and no problems were ever lasting. They always got squashed, and we were able to continue to move on.
So one of the first things I had asked Onassis in class when I saw him in person after listening to their project, I'm like, "Were you super nervous?" And he's like, "Oh my gosh, yes." because Onassis does not talk that fast in person. So I think
He does not.
I think he had this nervous energy. But I absolutely loved having these two students in class, and they were fantastic because I was fortunate to have them in both team processes and leadership. So Ben, my question for you after listening to this clip, do you have someone that's made an impact on you through their leadership and or teaching style? Because I feel like the style of leadership that Josh and Onassis appreciate is very similar to your teaching style.
Sure.
And then as follow up, what type of learning culture do you like to create for your students?
Yeah. So definitely, I think more so recently I used to think coaches, but now I think teachers probably had more of an impact on who I am. And I'm thinking like it I'll come back to this. I'll come back to this. So there's a few teachers, or at least one in particular, who I've had that kind of I've taken his entire style as my own teaching style, and it's fantastic, right? Like, so he's a professor. He's a full professor in educational psychology. Actually, the first guy that I had for a teacher at Temple. His name's Avi Kaplan. He's a world renowned professor in motivation. So I had him in my first class in graduate school in 2010, and I walked into his class, and he sat us all down. He's like, "All right, I want you all to know that there are no grades in this class. Everyone is getting an A. So we're not going to be here to worry about our grades. We're going to be here just to worry about learning." And I think for him it was very much like, I'm going to take away any point of anxiety that you may have, and we're going to run this class very conversationally. I'm not going to lecture at you, which I also don't do. I don't do much lecture, but I do a ton of conversation. That's how I think classes should go. And I think he also knows, and this comes from a kind of a motivation theory, or I guess maybe a positive psychology theory, called self-determination theory, where it looks at three components. Like, people have three needs, right? Three psychological needs they're trying to fulfill. One is for relatedness, one is for competence, and one is for autonomy. So I think about that in my classes. Like, do my students feel competent in my class? Do they feel like they have the autonomy to learn? And is the class conducive to them feel as they have like a sense of belonging and feeling related to people? I think those are the best teachers. And mind you, you have to, you can't let people walk all over you and give them nothing to do, but to give them the freedom to explore, I think's really important.
Yeah, one of the things I was able to take a webinar through Temple last month, but it was about creating an environment of psychological safety.
Yeah,
And so
that'll
I
do
think
it.
that's definitely something that you've done in like the classes that we've spoken about, and that's a lot of the elements that I feel like that was something I definitely strived for this last semester, but there's always room for improvement, and
Not
so
everyone though.
yeah,
I've had some really, really difficult classes,
for
especially
sure.
within the past few years. Really, really difficult classes, which makes things which makes you question a lot of what you're doing. But yeah, no, I think it's so. And what I thought I was gonna say first is, I really think that the way that we do education these days, obviously I'm an educational psychologist, so I think about these things a lot, is teaching. I think our teaching is, I don't think our teaching is good.
Mm.
And I think and this is kind of what Onasis was talking about, is like, if we make our teachers become coaches, it's a very different thing, right? Coaches set up, basically scaffold a strategy for players to do the action, right? Teachers traditionally lecture and flick slides. That's not scaffolding any action. That's you telling them what they need to. That's just you telling them everything they need, and then they can move on. But then they're not doing anything. So if you scaffold the action in which they need and then have them do the action, that's a really important thing. That's where the learning happens, right? As opposed to just saying, it's like, this is what this bold word means. Now here's a test. Tell me what it means again.
Which
Right?
that connects to in one of our earlier episodes of this season, Sarah Lenny brings up in one of her other classes had watched a TED talk about how schools kill creativity.
Yeah,
And
sure.
that speaks exactly to what you're saying. So that's exactly what I think you and I try and fight against.
And I think good leaders and good teachers, because I think teachers are leaders. I think coaches are leaders. I think teachers should be coaches. And again, this comes from my sports background, but a lot of, I think what's really important is giving people the tools they need to, they need to giving them the tools that they need to be successful, but not telling them what they need to do. Show them what the tools can do if you use them a certain way, and then giving them the autonomy to use that thing the way they want to do it, right? As opposed to just making things extremely rigid, which I think we do a lot in education. Is we make things rigid. This is what you need to know. This is how you do it. You're done. You're good. But that's not. I think we need to teach people how to manipulate the things that we give them, and I don't think we do that a lot.
And as far as like different teaching styles, it's been really interesting over this last semester to understand with the new football coach that Temple has brought on, how because I had a lot of football players in both of my classes, that the guys who were on the team before the new coach came around, like how different their coaching styles have been and how transformative it's been for the team now and how excited they are to play for this new coach. And
Sure.
I think we definitely need to go check out a couple games this fall.
Well, a couple of things you need to think about. Well, first off, the new coach is an Allegheny grad, so
That's right. That's right.
already makes him awesome.
Allegheny is where Ben did his undergrad and where he was a basketball legend, number 41.
Correct. And then from my understanding, by all accounts, what the previous coach could not do is create a sense of belonging among the players. What this coach is doing is creating a sense of belonging among the players. So if you want to get the most out of your team, this idea of relatedness and sense of belonging is what kind of stirs the pot. So you can have people of varying different levels and varying levels of motivation. I don't think you have varying levels of skill, but when you get someone in there that can relate to the kids and encourage them and be there for them and show that you care and create an atmosphere where everybody cares about everybody else, that's special, and not everybody can do that.
That also sounds like what we're trying to do in the classroom as well. It's been interesting to see the parallels of how Onasis speaks about a coach as how it relates to us as teachers.
There are so many things that need to be fulfilled before you can just get to say gain this knowledge. So many things, right? Like you have to want the students to want to be there. You have to have them interested. You have to have them motivated. You have to have them engaged. You have to give them voice. I mean, there's so many things in there before you're even just like, show me that you know this material. And I don't think they don't tell you that. They don't teach you that.
Well, and this is going to come up in the next clip. Josh talks about like being able to like feel welcome within the community. So to set the stage for this next clip, Josh asks Onasis about his thoughts and feelings surrounding diversity and inclusion in leadership.
I've definitely experienced that growing up because I went to a predominantly I moved to the suburbs when I was like 19 years old, 19 years old. So I've experienced that. I've been there since 8 to the age of 19 before I came into college, and I came to a more diverse school. So it was I want to experience the same things I experienced back in the suburbs rather than being at Temple University with it being so diverse. So I experienced those things a lot. Coming like I would say like if I would like go to like a grocery store or something like that, they would ask me like, what are you doing here, type of thing, or things along like those lines, and look at me weird or not want to not want to be around me or things like that because a stereotype like because
Yeah.
that like that diverse people might carry around
Yeah.
they'll look at it they'll look at it as that and and that's why they'll view me as before they actually get like to know me, so they will not want to be around me, or they hear things about me, they hear anything about me, they will not be around me. But like me knowing myself, like I don't carry those traits, and once they get to know me, like it's a different story. But definitely I've experienced those type of things.
Yeah, and I mean that's it's a really negative mindset. And to go off that, would you say that you feel that when people are more emotionally intelligent and just understanding of that that's just wrong, like when you feel welcome from the start, does that just make you feel a stronger connection to like leaders that you'd have to work for or be with?
Throughout like the leaders I've had, they I've never had I never I'm blessed to say this, but I never since leaders I've had I've never experienced that because I feel like once like once like they know me, not even knowing, once like they speak to me and like they get understanding about how I grew up, or like the way I talk type of things, like they wouldn't look at me as like a negative person or like think about that like that stereotype was me. So so yeah, I would say I'm pretty blessed not to go across not to cross those lines.
Yeah, and I think that's a really, good point to make, that no leader you've ever had has had that type of mindset, because that's not how you're going to get to that spot of being a leader.
Yeah, facts though.
You make such excellent points, and it just goes back to everything we were just talking about. So I'm going to bring it back. We talked about this interpersonal communication class that you taught in the fall. Did you end up teaching it in the spring, or are you teaching it this coming fall?
No, I think it
Okay.
was a one and done kind of thing.
But the students that I had in my classes that took your interpersonal communications class absolutely loved it, and said it was one of the best classes they had ever taken. So what? Which it's amazing to hear that, because I just remember how your approach going into it, that this was a class that was kind of thrown at you, that it's like, okay, you're going to teach this, and so having to figure out what you were going to do and make a plan, and kind of sticking to the teaching style that you already use. How do you think the class went, and do you realize how impactful it was for your students?
Uh, so I think there's a couple things. I think first, maybe it was beneficial that I didn't know what I was doing. Potentially, I think potentially. Uh,
As a classic overthinker, I can totally feel you on that point.
yeah. So, and you also have to understand that, like, I teach every class like a psychology class. So if you put me in a certain class, like, I'm going to throw psychology at you, or think about it in psychological ways, not from a very kind of like human behavior kind of level. But again, like, the way that I teach is conducive for, I think, for student learning, because I make them responsible for their own learning. Right? Again, I'm not like the the responsibility, like, reading, right? It's silly because we have this all completely backwards, right? It's like, I want you to read, and then I'm going to cover again what you're already supposed to read, and that's just a waste of everybody's time. It's a waste of my time. It's boring. It's a waste of their time. They're bored. So what I did is I said, this is what you need. This is the reading. You need to read this. If you read it, cool. If you don't, that's on you. This is when this thing is due. We are going to discuss that reading in class. And when I mean discuss, I mean, like, we're going to talk about it. We're going to go deeper into it. We're going to think about what it means. We're going to do some activities related to the reading. And you're allowed to say whatever you want, right? You're allowed to engage with this reading however you possibly want, or engage with this topic. And I also throw them in groups too, to be like, hey, I need you to present this thing, which makes them responsible for essentially engaging their classmates. So a lot of times, again, it's more of a facilitation or coaching than it is straight lecture, right? Like I'm not that dude in a tweed coat up on stage, like lecturing about just throwing facts at you, because that's not it, right? That's not fun for you, and that's not fun for me, especially if you've already read about those facts. So I think probably what has happened is they've had traditional teachers their entire lives, right? They haven't had the Avi Kaplan teachers, that give you all the autonomy to think about things the way you want to do it. I think my goal is, obviously I have to have knowledge of the subject, or I have to at least know a little bit about what I'm talking about. But it's also my responsibility to make the class a place where people feel like they belong. That's my one main responsibility.
Feeling welcome,
right?
like what they talked about.
That's it. And feeling psychological safe. And again, I've been in charge of classrooms where I've done a terrible job of making things psychologically safe. Right. And we can talk about that. But, I think one of the things that is important for a teacher is to make the classroom conducive for people to have voice. And people are privileged in very different ways in the classroom. And I'm thinking about privilege in terms of, like, some people like large discussions, some people like group work, some people like individual things.
Well, that's how I'm coming to peace more with teams now being asynchronous, and we're only meeting once a week. And I'm like, why are we doing this? Because it's team processes. They need to be working together. So now
Correct.
I'm starting to come up with all of these kind of creative ways of what I can do with this asynchronous lesson, and having conversations in the well-struck community, that realizing as like an extrovert that a lot of students are introverts, and maybe they're going to feel a lot more comfortable kind of speaking their mind or saying like really what they're thinking and responding to the reading, responding to like a recorded lecture, because they're not having to like speak up in front of class.
Yeah. So you'll find, so as you get deeper into it, and again, this is advice from another teacher that I've had, another expert teacher, who's like, you have to understand that not every student is going to engage the same way in the class, which means that how you set up the class will privilege some students versus the others. So if there's someone like you or me who doesn't mind speaking in front of 20 people or 30 people, cool. We're gonna be successful in a discussion class that uses whole class discussion. Some people like to be in small groups. Some people thrive in small groups, right? Some people thrive individually by doing individual assignments. They may not look like they're engaging with the larger discussion, but they probably are. They're probably writing stuff down, or if you give them time to break those things up. And there's like different activities that you can do. So I always for this class, I always started off with, here's a question that I have. Take 2 minutes or 3 minutes to write your thoughts on it. That privileges the people who don't want to talk. Then I say, all right, find somebody who you want to talk with about what you found, or find a couple people, right? That privileges the people who like the smaller groups. And then it's like, okay, now we're going to have a large group discussion, and then you hear the normal people in the large group discussion. But there's ways of kind of like getting everybody to chat, and that's not even talking about. And then there's other kind of I guess things to take into consideration as well. So like, Temple's a very diverse place, right? Temple, you can have a lot of different students, racially diverse, socioeconomically diverse, age diversity. To make people feel welcome, that's a challenge, right? Because you want everybody to feel good. You want everybody to feel psychologically safe. And a lot of times, there's psychology talks about, it's like, depending on who's in the classroom, some groups may feel, depending on what that identity is and the intersections of those identities, may feel as though that they can't talk, or they don't want to talk, or they're scared to talk because they might feel like they're not smart enough, or they not feel like they belong, right? So it's a delicate balance between many, I guess, different aspects when you're teaching. So I think one of the things that I try to, just to bring it back, like I think one of the things that I try to do is really make sure that first and foremost, people know that I'm not that stuffy dude who's just going to be up there and like and judge them based on, based on like a test or a midterm. Like I want them to talk, I want them to share, I want them to make mistakes. I don't know, say a lot of swear words in class. I think that's always fun. Say a lot of swear words in class. But I do that for a reason. One, because I say a lot of swear words all the time. But two, I think it shows it's like,
It's
oh,
humanizing a professor, and
yeah,
what some of these, one of the other recordings of another student group. It's, they recognize the difference between like all the professors that they've had, and some are just cold and emotionless and unresponsive versus
teaching's not
folks
that
like
though. Teaching's not
and
that. Teaching is not a profession where you can be cold and you can be emotionless and you can't answer your students' emails. That's not it. Again, it's like coaching. You have to be hands-on with the students. You have to tell them when they're fucking up. You have to tell them when they're doing things, but you have to encourage them. You have to tell them that they're doing well, that they're trying hard. You have to tell them try harder. I mean, I tell students all the time, Onasis for one.
And he was so wonderful. Like there was an assignment that he turned in, and I was like, no. I looked to you for advice on it, but
not college level work.
He's done better. I know he can do better. I'm more than happy to give him an extension. And then he turned in, a brilliant paper that it's like, I definitely understand. And I really appreciated the vulnerability and the courage that these students had to speak up and say, like, I need a mental health day. I need an extension on this paper.
He works hard. And that's why I would say stuff. It's like, this isn't college level work, because he would respond to that, mm-hmm. right? Just like if one of his coaches is just like, you're going through the motions or you're not trying hard, you can do better than this, he'd respond to that. Some people don't, right? Or I like to be very direct with people and be like, I don't know what's going on, but this work isn't good. We need to have a conversation.
Mm-hmm. Everyone I had to have those conversations with was very receptive. And
tell me what you need from me. How can I help you? How can I support you?
And they respond to that very well. So I think that segues excellently into our next clip, where the theme is helping the next generation of leaders.
And that's terrible if a leader would go across those lines or look at somebody because of the fact that they look different than you or something like that, or like even like just general, just like looking at somebody. Anybody comes in like somebody comes in for an interview, and maybe they don't have the money to dress in a full three-part suit, and they come in with like a polo shirt and some jeans on. You should treat them as a leader, I feel like, and during that position, I feel like you should treat them the same way how you should treat somebody who comes in with a three-part suit, even though they don't have that. And once you probably get to talk to them and know them, that like you will get the understanding about why they would show up in that, or you know what I'm saying, things like those lines. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. I think that relates to what you wanted to talk about with me being a preschool teacher, and
as well too.
The biggest thing for me when I'm trying to teach these kids, because they're 3 to 5, is just how to treat people and just being nice to everyone. And one thing that made me feel good the other day was my coworker came up to me and said that this girl in my class, she can't come up to her and said, she like put her arm out like this, and she's black, she is like dark skin. My coworker is has white skin, and she put her arm up to her and was like, we have different skin. Mm-hmm. My coworker said, she was like, yeah. And then she said, well, we could still be best friends.
That's a beautiful thing.
And yeah, and she said, and that's what I had told her like 3 weeks ago when she put her arm up to me and said the same thing. So that made me feel like I was doing a good job, and trying to put that mindset in the next generation. So when you go home to your store, that people aren't giving you negative looks just
right.
Black skin.
Believe it or not, thing that like that happened like you just explained, that is a beautiful thing because that can go a very long way because you don't know because people keep things back in their mind, you don't even know they keep things back in their mind. So that can carry them such a long way to the next generation coming up to where if she sees somebody like if she's a leader, just say like she grows up to be a leader, she already has that like that mindset of not looking at somebody because of like not judging somebody because of the way that they look or like because of the way that they carry themselves, something like that. You feel what I'm saying? Yeah, yes, that's a phenomenal point. I love that point you just came up.
So obviously I thought of, your daughter because she fits in that age group, and she's surrounded by so much diversity between family and friends, and I'm sure probably her daycare as well. And so I'm just very curious, what kinds of questions or observations come out of her sweet little mouth. What has your experience been like, especially as she, I know Lauren referred to her as a three-nager.
Yeah. Yeah, like, so I would say in terms of race, I don't really hear much in terms of race. I mean, occasionally she'll say like, like, "Mommy, my skin looks like yours and it's a little darker than dad's." But like, that's the extent. Uh, I'm not entirely sure why that is, and it may be because we live in South Philly and she sees people who look different from her all the time, which is why I would worry if we ever left South Philly because of like being in an area. So I'm thinking about like, I'm thinking about Josh being white in Alney at a school that's probably predominantly black, if not
Hmm.
all black, or I would assume probably black and a little bit Hispanic or some Hispanic. Um,
I think he shared with me that his students thought he was Puerto Rican.
yeah, not surprised.
It's
Not
like,
surprised.
nope, I am not.
Not surprising.
Thank you for
Uh,
asking.
but but I think she would probably ask something different if there was like if she didn't see a lot of different people on a regular basis, right? I mean, I think about my block, and I mean, she has Hispanic friends. There's a lot of Asian people that live on the block. There's white folks that live on the block. There's black folks that live on the block. Like, there's a lot of people that live on the block. So she's constantly seeing people who look different from her. So I don't. I wonder if it's like if she was in a predominantly white area, she'd be like, well, why is my skin darker than some of the others?
Hmm.
Or if she was a predominantly black area, why is my skin lighter than some of the others? But she doesn't say stuff like that. What she does talk about a lot is no, she's a weird little girl. But she's been I guess she's been focused on and like I don't want to like focused on like why people aren't here. So like why some people have died and what death means, and like she's like trying to wrap her head around like really abstract concepts. It's like,
So
well,
she's
why?
going to be 4 in a month, and these are the
Yeah,
questions she's asking.
yeah. She's like, well, she's like, why? She's like, why isn't just asking Lauren? She's like, why isn't your grandma here? Where did she go? And is she coming back? Like, so it's not anything like again, race is an abstract concept. So it's not so people at a preschool probably I would hope don't kind of haven't had experiences with race and racism or deep experiences with racism. Uh, but I think I'm trying to formulate how I want to say this, but I just I think depending on who you're around will I mean obviously depending on who you're around will impact the questions and things that you're noticing and the things that you're asking and the level of knowledge that you have, right? So yeah, she's not asking questions about race, and I think she's not asking questions about race because she sees a lot of different people on a regular basis,
I think
especially
that
about
makes a
who
lot
we
of
are.
sense. Yeah.
If we were in another place, I think that would be different. I think those would be questions that she would be asking, but she's not. So there's other questions, other questions happen, mostly, about books and things and like little shows that she's she's watching, and she's again like really caught up on Lauren's family and who's here and who's not and who's related to who, and like oddly enough about like babies. So we took her so we took her to Bach last week.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And so Bach has the flag. Have you seen Bach's uterus flag?
I don't know. I guess did they put it up with
They
the
did.
recent? Okay.
Yeah. So Violet asked me, she's like, what is that? And I'm like, that's a uterus. She's like, what's a uterus? And I'm like, oh my God, here we go. I'm like, it's part of the women, you know, the if you have female reproductive parts, you can have a baby and the baby forms in the uterus. So she was like, I was in mom's uterus. I was like, yes, you were in mom's uterus. So she had all these questions about coming out of mom's uterus and things being like babies coming out of her. Like I'm just like, oh my God. I'm like,
Tough, tough
thanks, Bach.
conversations. Yeah.
Thanks, Bach, for flying your uterus flag, which I totally agree with. But now you have my 4-year-old asking me about uteruses. So those are the questions. Those are the questions that she's asking. But I do agree with Onasis. Like you know, like it's a beautiful thing when we can all just kind of. And I think the thing is that what he's talking about is, you know, not immediately judging people. And I think that's a really huge thing.
I
And
think it's great that we're moving past the like you know, where are you from or what are you offensive question that people are just allowing people to express themselves
yes, someone's
how they
question.
want to. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
matter, you know, because I feel like that's I think we're moving past that, hopefully.
Yeah, and reputation, like reputation precedes you, right? Like you have things, you know, I even think like big football players, for instance. And I've made this mistake before. Like you know, you immediately see a college football player and you're just like, they won't cut it. I'm gonna be hard on them. When that's not a thing you need to do, right? A lot of them are really highly intelligent people who are there. And let's be honest, like school's their second job, right? Football's their first job, school's their second job. So, you know, not judging and understanding kind of where people come from, whether it's football players or whoever else, I think is really important and very difficult too, right? Because you know we all have our biases and implicit biases that we don't even know how we've learned or developed them. So,
And I appreciated that they were transparent with me about, you know, they have practice at 6 a.m. and it's just kind of like the way that their schedules are set up. And but I was really impressed because a good majority of them turned in excellent work on time, that
sure.
they are just putting in 100% in the classroom and on the field. So
Yeah, and it makes me think it's like, you know, what if you were putting in the effort? Because I mean, my guess is that they're putting in more effort on the field than they are in the classroom, which to no fault of their own, right? They're here to play that sport. But I also think it's like, what if you gave me this effort, all this effort that you give on the field in the classroom? Because I think it's really, really hard to give effort on both, kind of in both spots, right? Like to give 100% effort on the field, 100% effort in the classroom. Like that's a lot of energy you're using, right?
they're young. They're young.
Right.
Our last clip is on building trust.
Mm.
So I will go ahead and jump right into it.
Trust is a big thing, and like I mentioned before about being a leader, and leaders I mentioned growing up with my coaches being a leader throughout coming up through high school and now, those type of leaders built a phenomenal relationship with, phenomenal relationship and build trust within the teammates as a whole, and build with trust and build with personal players as well too. Because that's anything in life. If you don't trust with a leader, you don't trust what the leader's doing, then you're not gonna. There's no way that you're gonna have like a good relationship with them, or you guys can go far in a relationship. Even like just like dating somebody or being in a relationship, like trust is such a big factor. And if you don't have that, it's really like that's really like the heart. Trust is really like the heart, and you don't have the trust. That's really gonna hurt. But I want to switch to you about having trust because you mentioned about you work with kids 3 to 5. I want to ask you about the trust that you have created or that you have came across within what you were about. No, within what you've been doing.
I've worked at the place where I work now for a bit over a year, and when I started working there, I've noticed a lot of the times kids are excited about me because I'm different than most other teachers because I'm a guy, and they're like, "Oh, this is someone I could maybe play with more. Like he looks fun." So
Right.
I kind of install a lot of my trust with the kids by being fun and being friendly and like yeah, like I'll run around with you at recess,
Hmm.
but sometimes that can then turn on me because then kids think that I'm like too soft and like won't listen to me when it's like for story time or like whatever. Like so then I kind of try and install this like trust like that I have with them. Like if I can trust you that you're gonna listen and do what I need you to do during the school day, then yeah, like we're gonna have all the fun that you want to have. But if I can't trust you, then you're not gonna get those rewards. And I've noticed that when a new person starts working, like the kids just like don't really pay any peace of mind to them. Like who is this? And it takes a little bit for the kids to like trust them and listen to them that like they have their best interest.
And to piggyback on what you're saying about meeting somebody new and building that trust as well, we just added a new. We this coaching staff been here for like 3 4 months now, so we built a relationship and we built trust within all the coaching staff. But especially in the weight room because that's where we spend most of our time at. We're like winter workouts, and they came in January, so I was like winter workouts time. So that's when we spend the most of our time at with the strength coaches, and it just added a new strength coach to our to the staff. So we had to build, so we got to build trust and relationship with him as well. And I felt like it was easy to build trust with him because of the fact that um his background not necessarily because he been a head coach for like the Jets and things of that nature, like been like he been around with like great teams and he has respect around the world, but also he got ability to respect within teammates. And I worked out with him actually today. I worked out with him today, and there was and I built his trust because of the fact that like I know where his vision is, and also I know his workout. He took us to a little workout today, and I know that workouts can get us better. So that trust, like it's already coming up there for me. Of course, it's much different than your type of trust with building with like a way younger generation than like my generation with like my teammates as well. So like yeah, I definitely see what you're saying on that. I definitely understand.
So what's your reaction to what they had to say?
Trust building is hard. It's hard, but I think the way to do it is to show people that you care about them, right? And there's different ways, to do it. I think show people that you value them. And I think a lot of people don't get this and don't understand this, but and I think this is what Onasis is saying, right? Like, and actually, this is great advice that I heard from a colleague of mine. But he's like, if you want to know what people value, look where they spend their time and look where they spend their money. You can tell exactly what they value based on that. And so what he's talking about is, a strength coach who spends his time working with them, wants to be there, right? I think it goes for teachers too. I tell, and many students don't take me up on this, and it's either that they're young or they don't want to, or they care less about school or my classes or whatever. But what I do is, I tell them, like, you have me for 15 weeks, right? Not just during our class time. Like, I'm your instructor for 15 weeks. I have an office. I have a credit card. If you want coffee, like, we can go do these things. Like you have access to me for 15 weeks. I email back quickly unless I'm like gone or out of, or it's, 12 o'clock at night. Like, I'm not going to email you. But I value you, and I can show you I'm offering my time for you. So I think that's a really important thing, right? I think it all comes back to like showing people that you're valued and belonging, right? Do people value, like, can people do you feel that you belong in a certain place? And I think that can be, explicit, someone telling you that or showing you that, or that can be implicit, kind of like the ambiance of a certain spot. That could be, a good vibe or bad vibe.
And everybody has different comfort levels when it comes to their methods of communication
Sure do.
and relationship with their professors. And I feel like it was just such a different experience in grad school because I went when I was older. That I had no problem having more casual conversations with professors and having more of a
Truth.
relationship with them because I was in a different capacity. Even as like a, type A overachiever in undergrad, I don't know if I ever really kind of like took advantage of those, because I did definitely had professors who were like that, even though I had no problem emailing them, and like communicating any sort of needs or absences, it's, I think maybe as a young person, it's hard to kind of wrap your head around unless you have specific questions. I think unless they are teaching a subject
Sure.
that is a passion of yours or something that you want to go into. So looking at it more from like a networking and advice perspective as opposed to, I don't know, just kind of like an off the cuff. I don't know. I think it
Yeah,
just,
no, I think a lot of it. I think a lot of it has to do with how people orient themselves to school,
for sure.
right? So like, I'm not, as I said, like I'm not that guy that's going to be like, here's the knowledge you need, there's your grade, get the hell out of here.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like I'm here to help you understand this material, but I'm also here to motivate you and to get and to make you somewhat interested in the material that I'm teaching because I'm probably interested in it too. So I think those are two very different ways, right? One way is learning for the sake of learning. One is learning to get a grade and leave, which I think are two very different, you know, orientations to school. And I think for students, especially undergrads, it's very much like, all right, I'm essentially putting a down payment on a college degree so I can get a job. How do I finish this and get out of here and get the grade
Yeah.
and leave?
Yeah.
And that's should not be the way that things work, right? It should be like, I'm
I think
coming.
that's why a lot of students are choosing to either start college later, take a gap year. I know Josh specifically, he took a pause on classes at Temple during the pandemic because he's like, why am I paying for Zoom classes? And I totally get it. And I think that these next generations are going to continue to, make their own decisions, maybe going to community college for a couple of years and then transferring while they figure out what they want to do. I think we're definitely moving away from the norm being I graduated high school, now I'm gonna immediately start college and then be in debt for
Unless you
forever.
know unless you know what you want to do, right?
Yeah.
I think if you know what you want to do and you actually like doing that thing, it's very different. But I think what may come to an end is this college being exploratory,
Mm-hmm.
which is not useful because it's so much money, right? So if I want to explore different majors and do this and this, and I leave with like a university studies degree because I don't have a full major, but I have X number of classes in a couple different majors. At the end of the day, it's probably a good thing, but it's also probably a bad thing because you're in debt with no real skills
Right.
or no real skills,
Right.
meaning like you don't have a degree in engineering or something, right? So I think which is unfortunate because I think if you have things like, because that then I think devalues majors like English and history and philosophy that are set up for thought and exploration.
Master's degree programs,
Yeah,
PhDs.
and so like, I mean, I wasn't this is like my first real job that I ever had. Like I didn't get it until I was 30, right? Or no, I wasn't even, how old was I? 32, 32, 30, 31, 32, right? But a lot of people don't have that luxury. My parents said it was okay for me to explore and think through things and not know what I want to do.
Right.
School's not set up that way. School is not set up the way to be like, yeah, spend 4 or 5 years thinking about what you want to do is too expensive, and that's unfortunate. So then, what do? You go into something that you think is going to make money. It may not be what you want, but you still have to get a degree, so it kicks you to somewhere else.
Well, I think one of the nice things, you can pretty much have any major and do a variety of things that I one of our other recordings, with Sierra and Celia, like they had these like changed their major several times, but just kind of had this journey, and the way that they described their journey was, what took me like 10 years to get there. Well, they figured it all out in undergrad. So I think there's a lot to be said for still like exploratory, as long as you can figure out what your next is. But at the same time, it doesn't really matter. Like come out the other side and kind of figure out where you're going to land next. And your first job out of college is always going to be awful. And that's just kind of how it is.
True point.
So, and I think what's great about this generation too is they're saying a lot more no to toxic workplace cultures, and saying no to places that don't appreciate like a work-life balance. And so that's one of the main reasons that this semester I will be exploring toxic workplace culture in my intro to qualitative research class.
There you go.
Very excited about it. Well, Ben, this conversation has been very educational. Thank you so much.
As I would hope.
Thank you so much for having this chat with me today. I can't believe we're 11 days out from the start of the semester, but here we are.
Don't say that.
He says, don't say that.
Don't say that.
It's going to be a great semester.
Yes, it's going to be wonderful.
Ben, thank you so much. We also both want to thank Josh and Onasis. You guys are great. And of course, thank you to our listeners for tuning in today. Follow Beyond the Venue podcast on Instagram and check out seasons 1 through 3 streaming on all of your favorite podcast streaming platforms. Have a great day.
This is a Bivesta production.